Hi, everyone. We're finally getting all these podcasts out. They've just been accumulating, and I just haven't been able to get to editing them and putting them out there. So now we are. I want to thank everyone that's followed us on this journey with Twin Peaks. There will be one more episode at some point going over the fan book, A Skeleton Key, Twin Peaks. However, after this episode, we are going to be moving formats to another show that you've heard us probably talk about at the end of our podcast called Rate That Album, where Joe and I will be going back and forth between albums, picking an album that both of us will have to listen to, that maybe the other one's never heard of or whatever. So if you guys have album suggestions as well, feel free to email those to us or message us. Again, thank you everyone for the journey, and here we go. We're going to get all those podcasts up, and this would be the last true Twin Peaks podcast. Thank you for taking the journey with us.
Hi, and welcome back to a podcast above a convenience store, Talking Twin Peaks. I'm Joe Fremming. With me, as always, is Paul Muad'Dib. How you doing, Paul?
Happy New Year. We're in 2021. It still feels like we're in 2020.
Yeah, and we're a month and some change shy of when we first started this podcast.
Yes.
A year and a month. Yeah.
Yes. And I'll say right now, the continuity on this is going to be a little off. So yes, we recorded one a while ago. The holidays came up, got us a little busy, so we took some time off. So we are recording this one the first of the year.
Yeah. And so we got through the entire series. Now we're on the last pretty much the last word on Twin Peaks, and unless they decide to bring it back again. But we have another episode after this, but that's more fan speculation book that we're going to dig deep in. But this is the last official word from the creators, final dossier, Mark Frost, released after Part 18. And it works kind of as, it's basically a companion piece to all of Twin Peaks. It just, I think just because of the scope of the return, like Frost did the Secret History, which was pretty in-depth, but this is kind of like a slimmer, it's a pretty quick read.
Very quick read.
Yeah, it pretty much brings you up to speed on the characters that they weren't able to get to in the show, in the Secret History. So it kind of works like that. I called Part 18 a coda. I felt like that, and I think this is kind of like Frost's little coda too. Lynch and Frost kind of did their little thing that's like that, kind of like, this is it. And so here we are.
So, yeah, and just to kind of preface on that or piggyback on that, I think Frost knew that there was going to be a set of fans that were going to be upset that they didn't get some of the resolution on the characters, because as we said throughout this podcast, you and I went to the book signing when Secret History was out, and it was announced shortly, like within a month, I think, before the show started, that there was this second book. And I think Frost had that insight of, this isn't going to appease some of the fans. So we're going to have to do this to kind of talk about what happened with the characters.
Yeah. And part of it seems like this, especially the final dossier, it seems like more like sketches of ideas
Mm-hmm.
that him and Lynch went through. And then they just tossed it aside for a more ambitious thing with the return. You know what I mean? Like, this just seems like it's, it's like, it seems like they had it sketched out. Like, okay, so this is what happened to so-and-so. Doesn't fit in the return. Let's just scrap it. And then, it's not uncommon for people to reuse things that just didn't fit in another medium,
Yes. And I do also think that this might be some notes too from back if they were going to do season 3, kind of where some of the characters were going to go.
Yeah. It also fills in the blanks with some of the things we saw in the return with like James. Because James has always been cool.
James has always been cool. Yeah, so, and when I say season 3, I mean, the 1990 season 3, not the return. Because there are some things in there that do kind of feel like these were notes over the years in my mind versus just what they sat down and did. And so I guess we'll jump right in. So the dossier kind of opens with this in-office memorandum, essentially, which it talks about her, Tammy Preston, the follow-up to the dossier, and presents it's the finished report, and a lot of things are referenced from Major Briggs, and she thanks Gordon Cole for the opportunity and going forward, as we know, with the Blue Rose team.
Yeah. And she brings up like things that we saw in the last few episodes, like like when you saw Cooper and stuff like that. This is pretty much the follow up to the events of the return as well. It operates like that. Like at the end, it kind of it kind of ties it together with part 18. It's not who killed Laura Palmer; it's where is Laura Palmer.
Yep. Again, we talked about that last episode where it's Cooper's asking the wrong question, not when are we, but where are we?
Yep. Again, this is filling in the blanks. Some of it I think is really interesting. Some of it I'm just like, I don't give two flying fucks about.
Yeah, it was nice. When I first read it, it was nice to get all of it. But going back through and reading it for the second time, there was quite a few things that I was like, I don't care.
It goes a little too long on Norma's mom. I'm like, I don't give a shit about any of this. How she met Ernie, like, fuck, I don't care.
Empty Wentz, yeah, we never cared about Empty Wentz, although that was the true secret of Twin Peaks, was all about Empty Wentz.
It seems with like some of this, it's like trying to fill in the gaps from season 2, and like Frost, like, come on, man, most people are like us, they'll just skip over most of that bullshit.
Pretty much. And because there were characters that we didn't care about. There's some things for characters that we didn't care about to begin with, right?
Like Snake.
Hey, look at that! Finally, it took the entire podcast for you to call him Snake with me. Yes, mission accomplished.
Oh.
So
let's start this off here.
Yes,
chapter 1 is one of the more hilarious, and it's also the one that's different from the rest of the chapters.
Mm-hmm.
In that, for the most part, this whole book is written from the perspective of Tammy.
Yes.
The first part is Leo Johnson's autopsy report, which is written from the perspective of Albert. And this I think this shows like how in tune like Miguel and because I think it's pretty obvious that Frost was the writer when it comes to the show. And it really comes through when he's writing from Albert's point of view. I just read this in Miguel's voice, and it just gelled.
Oh, yes. Oh, God, yes. I was giggling the whole time when I was reading that first part, because I do think there was some serious synergy and some between Frost, Miguel, and
Lynch.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yes.
But it's just like, it's one of those things where it just shows like when somebody is a really good writer, and I think Frost is a pretty damn good writer, it shows, because he just got right into the tune of that character. Mm-hmm. So we find out Leo, after basically what happened was, I think somebody told Frost and Lynch over the years, like, what was the deal with the tarantulas with Wyndham Earl, because they're not going to kill Leo if they bite him. so it's like Frost using Albert as his avatar. Like doing like some meta, like, I can't believe Wyndham Earl thought this was going to work.
Right.
Yeah. Shortly after what we saw in the show, Wyndham Earl returned and he just shot Leo dead.
Yes.
In the heart.
Basically. In the heart.
5 times. 5 times.
5 times.
Four of them around the heart and 1 dead center.
Mm-hmm. So. And and they assume it was Earl, because it was someone who used an FBI shooting stance. So I also took that as it could have been Darkdale.
Yeah, it could have been Mr. C.
Could have been Mr. C.
Given how meticulous Wyndham Earl was, I don't know. I think he was just fucking with Leo. And we get a little more insight into, like, Leo was tortured by this guy more than because we saw the shock collar, but it turns out Wyndham Earl was putting out burning cigarettes.
Was really fucking him up, yeah.
Yeah, this is the Wyndham Earl I wish we would have saw.
Right? Yeah, it would have been a lot better. Had we gotten that Wyndham Earl, and that was the thing I brought up in the second season, when we did that, was I didn't like the Wyndham Earl that we got. He was, and you brought up, he was 60s Batman. Yeah, he was Cesar Romero.
We do, I mean, he did get a little bit of because he's much darker in the finale of season 2. I think that's what Lynch and Frost had more in mind, but what happens when you leave your show.
You did it to yourself. Hello.
So basically, Wyndham Earl, before he went and dressed up like a log lady to kidnap Annie, he just shot Leo dead, just not to leave loose strings.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I would agree with that.
And this,
then we get to Shelley Johnson.
Yeah, this was it doesn't add a whole lot to my experience of Shelley. We learned that she's pretty much the same age. She's 2 years older than Bobby. Something like that. Yes. She was because she went to prom, like her junior prom with Bobby. He was a freshman, I think, is what they say. She drops out of high school. She's pissed at Bobby because he starts dating Laura Palmer.
Yep.
She goes to the Roadhouse. There's a little commentary about like all these minors being
at the Roadhouse. Yeah. Yep. Yeah, which we've commented on several times.
Yeah. Where she meets Leo Johnson.
Yep.
And the rest is pretty much history. Then it kind of goes into her and Bobby kind of like have a shotgun wedding after the events we saw in the second season.
Yep.
They have a child, and then it just kind of like, it's weird because like Tammy's kind of like saying, I know this person's kind of special to you, Gordon. We'll get back to her, and it never does.
It never does. Yeah, I was expecting more later, but it never does.
Considering he told it, the book says more is coming on Shelley. So I'm guessing that could be a mistake and like a chapter got cut.
Yeah, or it could honestly be that he wanted to do more with it. I mean, I'm thinking, literally, he wanted to do something with it, and it just didn't happen, right?
I mean, it's just. I mean, Shelley's great, but I mean, how much time can you devote to such a side character?
Well, yeah, absolutely. I mean, what do you do? And I think that's part of it too. I mean, she wasn't a major theme in when it came down to it. I mean, she was a fan favorite, but what did she really lead to the real plot of the show?
And considering her role diminishes quite a bit in the second season,
Very much
basically so. Bobby's girl, and it's just.
I wish I had Bobby's girl. Yeah.
So we kind of get a little background on Shelley, and nothing we really couldn't have deduced anyway. Then we get to one of the more interesting chapters is Donna Hayward.
Oh, yeah.
So, I mean, it kind of starts off with Doc Hayward finding out he's been brutally cucked for 20 years by Ben Horn. And that's when we saw him, we assumed probably killed Ben, but no, he ends up driving him to the hospital and admitting him.
Oh, God. Yeah. So, there's a lot that goes on here, but basically what happens is that he won't. He says, the Hayward was working with Cooper, but I also feel like Doc Hayward wasn't gonna work on Ben Horn, so he had a different physician do it. And within a couple of months, I think it is, we find out that Will filed from divorce and left for Vermont. Donna wanted nothing to do with her mom after graduating, so she went to New York, and Eileen raised Harriet and Gersten.
Yep.
And it turns out that she was getting money from a Cayman Island shell account.
Ben Horn was basically financially supporting her.
What was supporting her? Harriet left for Wisconsin. For Washington. The University of Washington, became a pediatrician, and Eileen.
We saw what happened to Gersten.
Well, it does. This is my point: is that it does explain, in a way, I think this is really smart writing because it explains why Gersten was all fucked up.
Yeah,
like her entire family just fucking destroyed. Because if the Horns had stayed together, I think you looked at what it was, and if the Haywards had stayed together and hadn't had this fuckery, and in all honesty, this part does not interest me at all because it felt so fucking dumb.
It interests me just to knowing what happened to Donna, and it also reiterates that Doc Hayward saw Cooper in the ICU unit. Mr. C, he sees leaving Audrey's room.
Yes, that
kind of hammering that home again.
Yes, that part was interesting, but for the most part, though, I didn't like the whole Donna Donna was Ben's daughter angle from season 2.
They painted themselves in a corner. There's not much they to do with that now.
No, there was very little they could do, and I think again it was really smart because that having this whole broken home and everything just being torn apart leads to where Gersten, being the youngest, was fucked up, right?
Yep.
And
Donna becomes a model, which is like okay.
Yeah, that was.
She ends up with substance abuse problems, and she kind of becomes more humanized toward the end, where she ends up moving near Doc and helping him at his clinic, I believe.
I think so. I don't think she did it the whole time, but I think
no. But toward the end, like once
towards the end, she did. Yeah.
So we at least we get like some resolution with Donna, because that was, I think that was like besides Audrey, Donna was completely, with the return cut out. I don't think they mentioned her a whole lot in Secret History. So it was like, and frankly, she was a pretty big character in that first season. So I'm kind of glad we got some, whatever. Probably because, Laura Flynn Boyle was not going to return for the return. I don't think Lynch would want her in the return.
And I'm wondering why they didn't get, from
From Fire Walk with Me,
Maura Kelly. Like what was Maura Kelly doing?
Yeah. Well, again, the return was so massive. Like, there's like how many characters can you cram into it at that point? Like, and that is one of the reasons why we don't get Catherine Martell in it. I mean, it was like, the return was like something that was like beyond the original show. So, I mean, some characters had to go to the cutting room floor, I'd imagine.
I guess, again, it just felt like, what's the word I'm looking for? I didn't care. Right. I think ultimately that's what I'm looking at. Is I just didn't give a shit about it. So I think that's my take on it. But again, the Donna stuff though was interesting. Yeah, how she her life just basically slid out of control.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, and the Doc Hayward stuff, I thought, is like, now we know like what happened to him, and like going to the next chapter with Ben, like we get like some insight into life after what we saw in the first two seasons.
Yeah, the separation between him and his wife.
Yeah. So the next chapter is Ben and Audrey. There's some interesting tidbits in this one. This one kind of hits home that Audrey was in psychiatric care after the birth of Richard.
Mm-hmm.
She became agoraphobic, big drinker. She married her accountant, which I think is
Charlie,
yep. But I think like everybody's like, she's at a lodge. I think she's just fucking crazy. I mean, she's had a pretty traumatic life. Like, being blown up in a bank and being raped immediately afterwards is like, that's enough to like put somebody on a bad path for the rest of their life.
Yeah, so we talked a little bit about this. It's been again, continuity is a little off here, but we talked a little bit about this
where I still think that the theory of mine that she's still in the coma is where I'm really where I'm thinking things are. I think
coma
that
from the bank explosion.
Yeah,
How could she have married her accountant if she's in a coma?
So this is my thought. Well, no, hear me out here. Is that I know the book is saying what the book is saying, but I don't think that she ever woke up. Like, I could see where maybe her accountant did marry her. I don't know. There's I mean, that flash of her in the looking at herself when she's in the psychiatric ward, I mean, that's obviously what that is.
Yeah.
Means something, right? So, I mean, maybe she did wake up from the coma. Maybe her accountant did take advantage of her and she had a total mental break. But I don't think that, I mean, that there's something there that's not there in my mind. And I just don't know how to explain it properly.
I think the thing is with her and the return is just the bullshit of Sherilyn Fenn wanting more to do, which caused the inconsistency here. But I'm just going to go with the canon we have here. Audrey woke up and her life has just kind of became shit. She became a drunk, agoraphobic. Her kid is out of control. She married Charlie. Like, I mean, she's traumatized, like, no matter what. So, I don't know. But again, the stuff we saw in the return, a lot of it was added just because Sherilyn Fenn wanted more to do. So,
well, we knew that. We knew she wasn't happy with it. She got it added in. I guess that could be the case, but I don't know. I just thought the flash there of her being in there. I think maybe she did marry Charlie. I know that she knows things that are going on in the story, but
yeah, that wouldn't make sense if she was in a coma, if she knew all about the other stuff.
Yeah, you bring up a valid point there. I did. Yeah, that whole thing got fucked.
I just think that was just one of those oopsies in continuity, and it was just like, we'll just keep it mysterious or whatever. I think she woke up and just the idea that she's pregnant and she just went through a trauma, and then like even secret history of that. Was it the letter she wrote and all that? It's just, and again, I really don't give a shit what happened to Audrey. Like, she's one of my favorites, but I'm not gonna overwork my brain on her at this point. But we do know the experience messed up Ben, and we find out his Ghostwood project turned out to be for a private prison. The private prison.
Oh, God.
Was, actually stuff that was happening in the early 90s where people were building private prisons, and we saw how well that worked out all around, right, Paul?
Oh, my God.
The for-profit prison industry, which, I feel like, Frost is a pretty liberal guy, so I think sometimes he goes off on these little tangents a bit.
Yes.
I get that's your personal thing, but that has nothing to do with like the worst business transaction in history we saw the first 2 seasons.
Oh, yeah. Oh, my God.
Because from my understanding, they were going to chop it down and turn it into like condominiums or like housing or whatever. That was like, it seemed like that was the plan that they were going for.
Yeah, they never really did explain what the Ghostwood project was, right?
I was just under the assumption it was like a real estate venture, so it's like high-end condominiums or something for like, because it's like like a resort town type of thing. But
yeah, the book states that basically what happened was it was a horribly troubled project. And
well, we talked about that at nauseam.
Yes, and I don't think they talk about in this book. I think it was the last book where they explained Catherine Martell's why she's not around.
Yeah, and secret history.
That was secret history. So, she gave everything over to Ben. And yeah, so it was owned through a shell company, because we've learned that Ben loves his shell companies. We learned that through Donna, through conservative investors.
Yeah.
And the company proved itself. In the book, it says an absentee landlord in the worst sense. It was an ugly, brutish structure built by lowball contractors to save money. It is widely considered the ugliest object in this otherwise pristine valley. And Ben Horn referred to his own prison as the private prison as the blight on our land. Yeah,
he made a off it though.
He did, and they do explain that the arrival of the prison coincided with a sharp rise of medical issues, alcoholism, depression, opioid addictions, abuse and illegal trafficking, domestic violence, and suicide, which were all going on to begin with. That was kind of
I was going to say that was like the whole premise of Twin Peaks. That stuff was just under the surface.
Yeah. Yes, but it does kind of show that Ben, because of Audrey, I think in a way, changed. Yeah. That whole thing, I think also Donna. Yeah. What happened with the Haywards, what happened with him, Ben lightened up a lot.
And we got some of that in Secret History, because Secret History goes into how he would visit Audrey in the hospital, and it really like humanized him a bit. Mm-hmm. And this kind of expands upon it a little bit more, which I like that. There's some redemption in a character who is pretty much a giant asshole throughout the first 2 seasons. Like, he's like the architect of awful.
Yes.
behind like a lot of the terrible things going on in town. So I like that they do give him a little redemption, and they do it in a way that's not like ham-fisted. Like it's subtle because he, it's not like after the explosion he's like, "I'm calling Ghostwood off." No, he took advantage of Ms. Martell because she's grieving after Pete died. Gets the land, and then he sells it to private prison industry. But he's living with some of this regret.
Yes, he is living with some of the regret, and I think they do that. Well, speaking of Ben, then they get to good old Jerry.
I love that they give us a little background on Jerry Horn.
Lifelong bachelor Jerry.
Well, for one, I love the fact that they put him as part of the Merry Pranksters with Ken Casey.
Right.
Early pioneers of like psychedelia and LSD use.
Ken Kesey, Jack Kerouac, that whole crew.
Hunter amazing. Thompson, it's like this all like
amazingly done.
And Jerry's there just enjoying it all. And it kind of explains why he's always like eating food in the first couple seasons, because I never really thought about it until I read this, and he's just fucking high out of his mind the whole time.
All the time. Yeah.
I just figured that's just who he was. I did not pick up on he was just stoned, because they didn't really give us indications that he was smoking pot.
Yeah. Well, we should have known, but yeah, I didn't pick up on it either. But yeah, it's brilliant. But yeah, they also talk about how, as they stated, accusations of malfeasance many times in the past, as she states it in the book. And he was the company's PR, the crown jewel of the family's portfolio.
Well, it turns out he's the breadwinner now for the Horns with his pot business. Pot
business, yes.
You caught onto that right away.
Caught on that right away, and he was behind the scene. You find out he was a behind the scene organizer for the legalization of it, and yeah. I love this. So, as a college student, Gozanga, class of '68, Jerry drove across country to attend Woodstock with his own private custom Airstream trailer. Appears briefly in an award-winning documentary of that landmark concert. Literally emerging from the Airstream with a bevy of nubile hippie chicks and a cloud of smoke. Oh my God!
Yeah, you can tell reading this too, like the characters that Frost personally liked writing for.
Yes,
I think Jerry was one of them. Obviously, Albert was too.
Yes, and then they bring up the domain names. highercalling.com, 8mileshigh.com, upandaway.com. Yeah, I enjoyed that one.
Yeah.
So great.
Yeah, just he's part of the counterculture, man. Like he was there.
Yeah.
And then this falls into probably what I don't care about as much as the double R stuff. This is dealing with the food critic.
Mm-hmm. MT Wentz goes into Marty, her dad, and
I mean, this seems like an overblown way to like fix some of the inconsistencies we read in Secret History.
Yes. Yes, but it does bring back MT Wentz. It does kind of retcon that, hey, that was a mistake. Yeah. And yeah, this one didn't do a whole lot for me.
No.
All we learn is that basically there was a Christmas, something happened at a holiday party between Annie and her stepfather, and
the stepfather tried to rape Annie.
Yeah, the stepfather tried to rape her, and Roland stormed out of the house, Blackburn, and yeah, he was declared dead. And
basically MT Wentz was a black widow.
Yeah.
Kind of character. Her husband's just mysteriously die. I don't really care. Still a little interesting knowing about. I guess I was a little interested when they were talking about like how Norma didn't know she had a stepsister in Annie until later.
Yep.
And then Annie is just like I mean, we got hints of it, and I think like this part, like this trauma, like the attempted rape and all that. I think that was like in the back burner for her character if there was a season 3, because like we saw like in season 2 and Annie's she has like the cuts on her wrist.
Yes, and they did allude to the suicide. Yep. Yeah.
So she's like, she has a lifetime of abuse, and this goes into her own chapter. This kind of like what people were, how's Annie? How's Annie? Well, I think what she say, I'm fine.
Yeah. I think Annie is not okay.
No, she's my guess is she's still partially in the lodge.
Yeah, Annie is in a bad way. Let's just put it that way.
What does she keep saying? Is it I'm fine once a year? She becomes lucid.
Yeah, something like that. It's something like I'm fine, or yes. And then she says one other thing, but yeah, I don't remember what else that was. Unfortunately, I it's been a little while since we watched it, but yeah, and she does. She comes around every once in a while and says weird shit.
Yeah, well, she only just says the one thing.
Yeah.
Once a year, around the time she exits the lodge, she says, I'm fine or whatever. I'm trying to find it here.
I'm trying to find it too.
Yeah. Yeah, it's just like, I think it's just whatever. She says she's fine, which is kind of like a play on the whole, how's Annie? How's Annie?
Yes. Yeah.
She's fine, but she's not fine. I think
she's fine, but she's not fine.
We discussed once you enter the Black Lodge, part of you is always going to be there. She's already a traumatized person, and she was pretty beat up when she got out of the lodge. We saw that especially in the missing pieces when she's in the ER and the nurse steals the jade ring off of her. She's just catatonic. I don't blame her. If I was dragged into a place like that, I'd probably be fucked up for the rest of my life too.
Yes. And then the one thing they do bring up was that it came out that because of the dealings that Ernie had done with, and had worked with the FBI, had worked with Denise and Cooper, they Ernie, when he was free to go, but he was served that MT Wentz had left Twin Peaks and had all of his belongings packed and stacked outside their Seattle house with divorce papers. So yeah, and they go into it where they think that the whole fight between her and Norma at the end was part of her just basically that Vivian MT Wentz is a horrible person.
Yeah, we kind of picked that up anyway.
Yeah, we knew that. And then apparently she gets married one more time, and I think he died, and then she's dead from a mysterious illness. Like, it was just stupid. I really didn't care.
Yeah, that shit, I just, whatever.
Mm-hmm. Again, the stuff with Annie was interesting.
Yep. I'm on the chapter. Every year, once a year, on the anniversary of that day, she was found in the woods without prompting or responding to any inquiry directed at her. At precisely 8:38 in the morning, she speaks that same single sentence to no one in particular. I'm fine, she says.
Yeah, again, you're stuck in the lodge, bitch. You're not.
Yeah, she's stuck. Yeah. So, but that kind of wraps into following Annie, because this stuff's all kind of intertwined. There's a Wyndham Earl chapter. We get a little background on Wyndham. It doesn't really give us like anything we haven't been able to deduce. He's missing. He's he was annihilated by Bob.
He was annihilated by Bob.
We've talked about rules in the lodge. My gathering is like when Wyndham Earl was trying to extort Cooper's soul, that crossed a big fat no line with Bob. He just annihilated him.
Bob was pissed,
and we don't even see him in the lodge ever again. So
yeah, no, Bob was pissed and destroyed him. It's unfortunate because, again, I liked the idea of Wyndham Earl, but even this didn't really make Wyndham Earl compelling.
No.
I don't know. It's just the one interesting note that Tammy does have is that Cooper seems to have this prevailing impulse to save troubled women, and it kind of leads into why he was attracted to Wyndham Earl's wife, why he was attracted to Annie, why he is so fixated on saving Laura Palmer.
Yeah. And part of that too, it's mentioned here, but there's also the kind of like the forgotten book, those the Cooper tapes, where you learn a little bit more about Cooper's mom. And
yes, I forgot about the Cooper tapes. Yes.
So that's kind of where his thing about wanting to save women came from, was his mom.
Yeah.
So we get that. So we're back in Twin Peaks. Probably the dumbest chapter is the Miss Twin Peaks chapter.
Fuck my life. Why was this included?
It's just we get the autopsy on Doug, who was such an intriguing character.
Oh, God.
Secret history. He died of a heart attack. The jade ring is stolen. Lana dates Donald Trump. And then Trump takes the jade ring from her. This is again shoehorning in the politics of the time.
Mm-hmm.
This would, it just, I hate that. I'm no fan of Trump, but if he was, it's just so this was so not needed. I did not need to know what the fuck happened to Lana.
Nobody gave two fucks what happened to Lana.
So let's get on to Dr. Lawrence Jacoby.
Oh my God!
Again, this is you can tell when Frost likes the character, right? These are the characters he likes, and I like them too because they're the offbeat ones.
Yes.
And we find out Jacoby, he had an interesting time there after he was disbarred from practicing medicine in Washington. He went on tour with the Grateful Dead.
So I love how she puts it in his 24-hour diner menu of ethical code violations.
Well, he had to shovel himself out of the shit, Paul.
Had to shove himself out of the shit. Yeah, and then he threw himself into the field studies of Hawaiian shamans. And he started looking at Aboriginal traditions like leprechauns, pixies, and elves. He just...
From 94, 95, he's on the road with the Grateful Dead.
The Dead, yeah.
Which Albert refers to them as the world's greatest bad garage band.
So brilliant. And, he kept on, as one likes to say, on trucking. Did you know Albert is a stereo and vinyl enthusiast with a jazz collection that numbers in the thousands? Yes, you probably did. I love that. And he was the band's senior spiritual advisor.
Yeah, which means basically he's their drug gopher.
Yep, which basically means he's their drug gopher. Then he ends up in an Amsterdam group called the Zonderkamp Institute, which translates to "born without a head."
Yeah, He's got like Stay in Amsterdam comes to an end in '98. So he gets all paranoid about Y2K.
Yep. Yep.
I should just mention here during that Y2K, how me and my buddy Matt were in the Everglades of Florida at a giant fish concert. So that feels totally on point with Dr. Jacoby.
That is brilliant. That is absolutely brilliant. Yeah, I was around that time. I was actually in Eugene, Oregon at a hemp festival.
Yeah, same thing. Fish concert, hemp festival.
Yeah, that was the hemp festival. I saw Hunter S. Thompson, who I was too afraid to talk to.
Oh, I mean, he was at that time. He was probably really fucked up, and he's probably had guns on him. I probably would have stayed away from him.
That was exactly my thought. Was I want to talk to him, but I'm guessing he's fucked up and he's got about 4 guns on him. Mm-hmm. Yep. So I just stared in awe at him. Yes, it was. That was something. Mm-hmm.
All right. Jacoby next pops up during the hanging Chad portion of the 2000 election recount.
Oh, God. Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Then this kind of like then 9/11, and he becomes kind of like a radicalized with politics in a sense. As we saw in the show, he's basically the left-wing version of an Alex Jones.
Yes, that's exactly what he is. Defiant liberal denial syndrome, as what he called the Ralph Nader supporters. Yep. Yep. And so he decided in 2003 to head back to Twin Peaks. Yeah. And he bought a mobile home, hauled up to a remote acre that he bought for merely nothing on the peak of White Trail Mountain, set up shop, and he reached out to his old bud, Jerry Horn, who became the first and only financial contributor to Jacoby's new enterprise.
Yeah, he starts embracing the internet and blogging.
Yep.
Eventually, that blog turns into a video blog, which we see in the show.
Yep, and he became Dr. Amp, which I think they mentioned Dr. Little Pops from back in the day. I think that's kind of a play, Mark Frost's play on Dr. Little Pops. But yeah, Dr. Amp Blast. The Dr. Amp Blast made its debut in 2006. Yeah, he did his nightly crusades, and it worked with it actually took off apparently. And he went national in 2012. Refused attempts by mainstream media to collect on him. But in 2015, he started his direct mail operation to dig yourself out of the shit.
And interestingly enough, he doesn't keep a lot of the portions. I thought this was like a get rich scheme. Mm-hmm. 90% of his income goes to charitable progressive causes.
Yep.
So he's not really rolling in the dough. He's putting action to his words in a sense.
Yes.
He'll take the hyperbole, and then like the donation that comes, he'll put it toward a real thing.
Yes, and you find. I mean, that also explains why he was in the shitty car in the return.
What was it? A truck? I thought it was like a beat up old pickup truck.
Yeah, whatever it was a piece of shit that barely worked. Then they do a Jacoby PS.
Yeah, which weirdly goes into James's story.
Yeah, isn't that weird how that goes into James's story? Basically, James,
he went on the run. He was put on trial for that Evelyn Mark. You know what? Who fucking cares?
I don't care. All you need to know is that he had a motorcycle accident. He wasn't the same after.
Yeah, I've had enough of you, James. Fuck off.
Mm-hmm. Sadly, yes. I had to. I had to do that. Yes, and then we kind of go a little bit into the whole Nadine, Dr. Jacoby, Ed thing.
Yeah, let's nip this one in the bud because the last part of this chapter is probably like the cherry on top of what we saw with in the return with Otis writing, singing "Since I've Been Loving You," Norma and Ed reconnect. You'll be pleased to learn, I think, that Ed and Norma got married not long after,
which was phenomenal.
Yeah, James played a song he wrote on his guitar during the civil ceremony.
Of course,
ruined everything, and everybody committed suicide. On to Margaret Coulson.
Yes, on to Margaret Coulson.
It was a tragedy when everybody killed himself after James sang his song, but
it was all he labeled it was "You and I Part 2" is what he called it, and I believe he also put a timestamp on the beginning of it, like 2:54 a.m. 2:54 a.m. Us and them, or excuse me, you and I, Part 2.
So we get to Margaret's chapter. This is one of my one of my favorite ones. It's just it's bittersweet. Hawk speaks at her funeral, and we get I'm not going to read it because it's a lengthy passage, but if you're a Twin Peaks fan, if you pick it up just for this part, I'd say.
Yeah.
The last part is, this truth I know as sure as the dawn, darkness will always yield to light when the light is strong. That's kind of caps it off. It's a really touching tribute. It's, that's a tough thing. Log Lady is such a favorite.
And that was, with that passage, again, we talk about, when Mark Frost is writing for characters that he likes and cares about, to have the way it's written, I could hear it completely in Hawk's voice.
And especially his treatment of Margaret in Secret History, the tragedy she went through, her husband being killed in a great fire and all that. It's just, you can tell when he likes these characters. Margaret's ashes are scattered in the Ghostwood Forest. Even Tammy here is kind of touched by this.
Yes, and she mentions how she would like to meet Margaret in the next world. Then we get to Harry, and it's kind of like what we knew, right? Which was
he got ill.
Yeah, he got ill, but he wasn't quite the same after Josie as well. She says right there in the book that that Cooper's support helped preserve his sanity and saved him from killing himself, essentially.
Yeah. I wish we would have gotten a little more with Harry.
Yes.
We just get 1.5 page on Harry Truman, which is kind of weird considering he looms so large, not only in the first 2 seasons, but in the return, be it not even being there. We get why Frank moved back to Twin Peaks to, take over his job.
Yep.
And she says if Cole wants to reach out, Harry would be more than grateful to hear from him. I don't know why Harry would. It's not like he spent a whole lot of time with Gordon. It seems almost like if Albert reached out, at least had more of a history.
Yeah, and I think that'd been an interesting thing to see.
That they do talk about how
he never did give up trying to figure out what happened to Cooper. But that for the 20 years plus, he never stopped searching for Cooper. And then it was cancer. It's confirmed it was cancer. And that after he retired, and that he was undergoing treatment, but he was fighting uphill. He kept the news from everyone. Only his brother was the only one to have known about it. But Hawk figured it out right away because that's what Hawk does. And that you find out that Hawk agreed to move back, take the job for 2 years, and then hand everything over to Hawk.
Yeah.
Yep. That Frank was going to only be there for a little bit, and that Hawk would be given the the station. And then I think next we get to Major Briggs.
This is where I think it's these were the notes with Lynch and Frost when writing the return on getting Mr. C and Briggs and listening post Alpha to Buckhorn, South Dakota. And this is what this chapter pretty much does.
Mm-hmm.
We get the what Tammy thinks went down at listening post Alpha. Basically, Briggs set a trap for Mr. C, kind of faked his death to go on the run, where he ends up in one of the portals, probably in Buckhorn.
Yep.
Yeah. So basically, this seems like this was probably part of script idea, and it just we all know how Lynch doesn't want to explain everything away, so it probably just hit the cutting room floor and ended up back in here.
I would agree with that. Yeah.
So Briggs and the double vanish from sight for the next 25 years after the explosion. What happened? Briggs's body was so blown to pieces that they couldn't 100% identify the body.
No,
whose body was it?
Right, and they do say they found a couple of his teeth, so I mean that tells you how far he went.
Yeah, he yanked some teeth out.
He yanked some teeth out. Yeah. Yep. Yep. And that they were inside the zone. Then it goes to Hastings and Ruth,
where they touch base with the Major.
Yep.
And it kind of gets into more detail about their interaction again, and this might have been early stages of the script. And I'm sure after, considering Don Davis was dead, they probably had to scrap a lot of this.
I think so.
Which would have been, some of this would have been really interesting to actually see, but again, when the actor's dead, how feasible is it?
Yeah. Yeah, it was. Yeah, and they kind of, she questions: was he hiding for 25 years, or was he in the portal for 25 years? What went on there? And she kind of explains how she didn't really know.
It's basically kind of telling us he was there for 25 years, hence why he didn't really age.
Yep.
When the body's found.
Yep.
Yeah, and then it just kind of goes over the stuff we saw in the return, like the hidden thing in the chair.
Yep.
Yep. Kind of goes into the background of the double. That's what they're calling Mr. C.
Yep, the double.
His kind of goes a brief into his criminal empire with shell companies, offshore banking, et cetera, but he is worth in the billions.
Yep, he was worth in the billions, absolutely, from everything that he did. And you learn that he wasn't, not that we learn, but they just, cement more about that he was involved in that black box, the glass box situation. He was trying to catch the Major, is what it was. We thought he was trying to catch Cooper. It was the Major he was trying to catch.
Yep.
Is what they put out there. And but they never really say what did he want, what was he after. So yeah, there is that, and then she doesn't really know what the double was, but we basically know it was Bob. It was Bob, and it was a tulpa, but it was a tulpa that was controlled by Bob.
Yeah.
I do like how she says, pardon my French for a second, Chief, but what the fuck?
Took the words right out of my fucking mouth.
Took the words right out of my fucking mouth. And then they talk a little bit about Philip Jeffries.
Yep.
They go into Jeffries. And that I thought was really interesting, was this whole thing.
Yeah, because it keeps it a mystery.
Right.
It doesn't, I like Frost, because this, obviously, the Jeffries thing seems to be more on Lynch's. I think when it gets more into Lynch's territory, Frost is cagey, and I think that's more out of respect for David. It's like, this is David's thing, so I'm not going to explain it.
Right.
Even if Lynch explained it to him, I don't think he would betray that trust.
No. They just mentioned that all this weird shit happened at Buenos Aires.
Oh, you can be in two places at once.
Yep.
They identified as a shadowy suspect.
Yep. And
identified a shadowy suspect, someone he believed to be the central person of interest in charge of this entire operation. And then we go into Judy.
Jaude. And Jaude, it turns out, as I mentioned in previous things, it's the Sumerian demon. And
at least that's still likely. Again,
right.
Frost remains cagey.
Frost remains very, very cagey. And then we talk a little bit about Ray.
That fucker
Ray, who was a deep cover informant. Who, Ray apparently was good at his job up to a point, because he got in the inner circle and worked with him. Where he was also working in Las Vegas. That he met, basically what they make it sound like is that Ray got in touch through Duncan Todd to work with Mr. C. And they say they don't know who he was reporting to.
We know it was Cole.
It was Cole. Yeah, it was Cole.
They touched on that in the return.
Yep. But in the book, she says, if it was you, Chief, I believe you would have told us, wouldn't you? And he kind of did. No.
Kind of did, but again, he probably wouldn't. Again, and I think this is, when they were making the return, Lynch had things he wanted to change in the script. And every time, and he would ask Frost. And apparently, Frost, there was not a single time Lynch asked for a change in the script. He said no.
Really?
So this might have been one of those things where he's like, yeah, change it, whatever. Like, even if he's having the book out, it's just like, do your thing, David, do your thing.
Oh, that's really cool to know.
Yeah, I learned that Room to Dream. Lynch's assistant, what's her name, talks about like how, Frost would never veto any of Lynch's ideas, which I think makes for a very, compelling artistic relationship between the two.
Very much so. Yeah, but, she brings out, even though we know he was reporting to Cole, she brings out that Ray thought he was working for Philip Jeffries, which then leads to this idea that maybe the double knew that Ray had been this double agent the whole time and was working on, was trying to get Jeffries out of him.
Yeah. But since Ray thought he was working for Jeffries and not Cole, the double was never the wiser.
What? No, he had no idea. Then they talk about the Dutchman a little bit. There was a motel in the exact spot in the 1930s owned by Horace the Dutchman van der Sant. And that John Dillinger once spent a week there. Then there's a 2-day gap in our knowledge of the double's movements between when he killed Rowe and when he showed up in Twin Peaks. So, yeah, and then she correctly assumes that he found Philip Jeffries. So, yeah. So then it kind of gives us this idea that, he was there for a while.
Yep.
And that time doesn't really work well.
Which is, a common thread we've discussed.
Very much so. Very much so.
Now we get to the chapter on today.
Mm-hmm.
She brings the Cockney kid, apparently. It reiterates like what we're talking about, going to the oddball Cockney kid with the green glove. Then the lights go out, and you and Cooper apparently apparate into the basement of the Great Northern Hotel. So, yeah, that actually happened, according to the timeline. It was something we kind of discussed last episode, if that was real or not.
Yep.
According to this, it did.
Yep.
What do we know? But it's interesting. I like this. And for the second time in the past 25 years, Special Agent Dale Cooper disappears from sight, sound, in the world we think we know. Fucking Dale. Just doomed, man. Like I said, he's on that record group, and it, no matter what, man, he's...
Yes, and she does bring up that when I spoke to our good friends at the sheriff's office, they all got slightly dazed and confused when they brought things up, and I were trouble recalling what happened.
Yeah. Because the timeline's changed now, and like...
The timeline's changed because on the front page of the news, Laura Palmer did not die.
Yeah. And we're just remember, Philip Jeffries said Cole will remember the official way this happened. Meaning Cole is the only one who's going to remember both timelines.
Which then leads us to believe that because Cole's working on these Blue Rose stuff, that he is in some way touched with the Lodge as well.
Yeah.
Which we assume.
Everybody who's enters these lodges or whatever, I think that part of it just kind of envelopes into their DNA in a sense.
Yep.
Because if like Cole has the ability to do that, then something like he's been, like Cooper, he's been touched and is attuned with the lodges. So Cole's going to remember, and as we see in this, even Tammy's memory of the events are starting to go all wonky on her.
Yes. And she does bring up some interesting things about what happened to the Palmer family. That a year later, Leland Palmer committed suicide.
Well, he kind of did in the basement of the police station, too. So I guess he was just doomed for that fate, huh?
Yeah, so it does lead me to wonder what happened to Bob from that point. Like where's Bob?
Yeah, that's an interesting question. There's some... I guess I don't know. I mean, it could be like, when Cooper goes to Carrie Page's house, there's that guy shot and has like a Bob-like orb in his gut. Maybe that was it, or that might just be a red herring. The Twin Peaks is all about red herrings.
Yes, it is.
So, like, that could just be his stomach extended from being dead there for days. So who knows?
Mm-hmm.
But Bob ended up somewhere. He doesn't,
Yeah. Yeah, we just don't know where Bob is. And Bob could have killed himself and ended up in that other area with Carrie. And, she could have killed him at that point and he could be in orb form again. I mean, the orb form didn't exist until the second, well, it could have existed because we never really did see what happened. Well, no, because
we saw like he killed Leland in the series. He takes possession of the owl.
Yes. And he wasn't in orb form. It was just more of a roaming spirit.
Yeah. So which to me is a little more frightening than the orb.
I agree. I think the orb is only there because Frank Silva died.
Yeah. Yeah.
It was more out of necessity than anything. And let's be fair, point of view shots from the villain are very well overdone. And are kind of a passe style film.
There's some terrifying things too. Laura disappeared, but Ronette still ended up on the railroad trestle, just like before. Meaning Leland didn't mess her up, but that means Jacques or Leo did.
Well, no.
Or it should have been Leland. He just thought that Laura was gone.
Well, remember, we saw Leland or Bob see her leave. So in the final episode. So as far as Bob knew, Leland knew she was with Leo and them.
Yeah. So that turn of events still could have happened.
That turn of events could have happened. He could have gone there, fucked them up, but couldn't find Laura.
And then still bring Ronette to the train car.
Well, no, she probably would have hiked her ass down. You know what I mean? Because they were up in that area. I mean, she might have just gone down that way.
Yeah, she was still, in a daze though. So I think Leland just still assaulted her, and I think in some way, Mike still prevented that or stopped Leland in some way.
Or maybe that's where Bob is. Maybe Bob's in Ronette, and that's why Leland killed himself a year later.
Well, I mean, I don't know if Bob can hop like that. I think his host has to deny, but for him to leave. But I mean, something happened to Ronette, and this kind of goes into like something that always stuck me with The Return. Is we see Ronette, but she's called American Girl.
Yes.
So that might be part of Ronette in that. So no matter what she was doing to be entangled with the lodges or the portals.
Yes, she was touched, and she's always going to be touched, right?
So she, but you know, she's in the good part, I think.
I think so.
At least like well, her mother pounds on the door and scares the shit out of her, but
yeah.
But she is able to help Cooper, so.
Yeah, that was, there's thoughts on that. That I read. I was reading on Reddit where someone thought that scene where that was going on was inside the apartment, where when Bobby's and Shelley's daughter is banging on the door, because someone took the time. I wasn't going to even bring this up, but now that it happened, someone took the time to copy the pounding of the door and overlay it on that scene with the American Girl, and the pounding is on. It's spot on the door pounds, with the pounds from Mother in that scene. So I don't know if that was just by coincidence or if it was just kind of editing where they took. I've done things like that with videos and things like that where I've taken audio I've already recorded and just to save time, put some reverb, messed it around, throwing some blips and burps on it to make it seem like it's a different audio. I've done that.
I've done that too, and that might be something Lynch did, or he might have just did it just because he thought it was cool and like another layer into like the mystery. Even if it has nothing to do with it, I think he would still get a kick out of doing something like that.
Mm-hmm.
The thing this book also, like a lot of people were debating about the little girl with the bug frog thing.
Yes,
part 8. People were vehemently, that's not Sarah Palmer. That's not Sarah Palmer. It was Sarah Palmer.
It was Sarah Palmer. The book places her at that exact spot at that time.
And I had no doubt it was Sarah.
No.
For me, just from a storytelling point of view, it's just they're pointing that to us. Like,
yes.
Sarah's off. There's something off with her, and something happened to her childhood that traumatized her.
Yeah, and they straight out say in this book that 11 years later, on August 6, 1956, there was a curious incident in the local paper about 15 miles outside of town where the Novaks lived. An AM radio station was viciously and mysteriously attacked. 2 employees, a receptionist and nighttime DJ, were found dead. Including the accounts for the next day, 6 sightings of strange solitary figures in the area that night. On the road with at least 2 placing them in the vicinity of the radio station. These people described them as hobos. And a bunch of people reminded hearing strange or mechanical word sounds coming from the radios. And many residents reported disturbances among their pets and livestock, claimed that family members blacked out. And when the sound stopped and the station went dead, and then, so this happened.
Yeah.
This happened.
Yeah.
And according to her parents, Sarah was found unconscious and unresponsive in her upstairs bedroom.
Yes. And I like Tammy's like, what to make of it? I have no idea, do you?
Yeah. Yeah, that's directly written to us as the reader.
Yeah. It's, and I think when they're making that, I think Frost is like, I'm going to nip this one in the bud because I think people are going to argue that wasn't Sarah Palmer. Even though we were very deliberately pointing you in that direction.
Yes. Now they talk about what happened after Laura's disappearance. This is important. Not her death, but her disappearance. She experienced severe bouts of depression. And in the years since, at least in the version where her husband commits suicide, so this shows that Tammy is still somewhat remembering some of the old stuff, but she battled alcoholism, addiction to prescription pills, social isolation, and around the time that Cooper disappeared again, took a vacation. She was named in question as an eyewitness to a particularly gruesome and mysterious death.
That's what we saw at the bar.
Yep.
Yeah. The poor man on the bar stool next because his throat was ripped off. Most of his neck is missing. Woo.
And she says, I'm writing this all down rapidly because my own thoughts are fuzzy and indistinct. She says something is wrong, whether it's with me or this place. I don't know. I really don't care anymore. I need to get the hell out of here. I booked a flight to Philadelphia. And then she talks about her final thoughts. She's like, hey, it hasn't left me even getting out of here, but it's fading the farther I travel east. I don't know what to make of it. Yeah. You want to know what happened there in that town and region to these people you knew, whom I feel you've come to know well. But what we're really finding out is he wants the report of the new timeline.
Yeah.
Yep. That's what, because as Jeffrey said, he's going to remember the official version.
Yeah.
So he needs to know what is happening with everything else.
Yeah, now, because since it's changed, he's got to know what, he's got to know what the difference is.
Yes. So this kind of puts the cap on it. And again, to me, this book solidifies some things to me in terms of people really wanted there to be this underlining deep meaning to Twin Peaks. And the truth of it is that, it's funny. You should check it out if you guys haven't, but the Red Letter Media did a recent review of Twin Peaks: The Return.
Yep. I liked how they kind of came to the same conclusion we did with that guy who was like, I know exactly what Twin Peaks is. And there's they just seemed really annoyed by it. And I was, the guy has really good theories.
He does.
But the way he presents it is so obnoxious that it's just hard to. And I like how one of the guys says, using out of context quotes from David Lynch to justify your points.
Yeah, that was Justin that said that. And and my thing with it is that you're right. And he has really good theories. It was the way he put it out there, and by saying this is the definitive thing. And what this book really hammers home to me, I don't know about you and to our audience, is that no, there is quite a few things that are concrete. There's this underlying mystery of things. There is layers upon layers that you always will get with David Lynch's work. And it is left vague and open because that is what Lynch likes to do. Lynch is one of those directors and writers, and so is Frost, that likes to make you think. And he does it in a very intelligent way. Again, I put him up there with Kubrick, with directing and writing, in terms of being able to mess with symbolism and metaphors and the abstract to a point where you could have 10 people sit down and look at it, and 10 people are going to walk away with 10 different ideas.
And that's the point, because it's a work of art. It's so open to interpretation, because at the end of the day, the only two people who know what this ultimately means are the creators.
Yep.
And that doesn't necessarily, but that doesn't take away from what we take away or because they're never going to tell us. And I'm glad because it's up to, because there's so much symbolism and, like you said, symbolism and metaphors and surrealism that, you can come up to all sorts of great theories, and that's the magic of it. And when you dismiss other people's views.
Yes. And that's my problem with that one YouTube video where the guy's like, this is the definitive, this is what it means. No, you're becoming dismissive.
Yeah. And last time I checked, his last name is neither Lynch or Frost.
No, so it was the pretentiousness of the video that came out. And, I think I'm going to give him a pass, even though I didn't like the way he did it, because I think he was excited. I think he really thought, I cracked the code.
Yeah, I get that, but did you see he did the follow-up where he's clapping back at people who are poking holes in his theory?
No, I didn't see that follow-up.
So he did a follow-up video. And this, I watched some of that too, and it was just he's dismissive and he's just arrogant. And it's just man, I'd watch this if you're like, this is what I think. Because I watch a lot of YouTube videos. I mean, we're all in lockdown.
Yep.
So, and I'm an insomniac. So I'll sit up until 2 or 3 in the morning watching theory videos on Twin Peaks because why the hell not? It's great.
Why the hell not? Yeah.
And there's some really good ones out there. I forget the guy's name. He does a series of them, and they're just really interesting. But he doesn't, and he's arrogant, but he's not saying this is what it is. Because, it's a piece of art. It's open to interpretation.
Yeah, and you and I have, through this thing, we've come to a lot of similar roads, and there's things where we've had to say, I get your point, you get my point. I don't know if I necessarily view it in the same lens.
Yeah.
And that's what it's supposed to be. Again, until Mark Frost or David Lynch come out and say, this is it, which they're never going to do. And I truthfully believe that Lynch is one of those people where he goes, this is my idea of it, but same thing to me, even as an artist, it's still art. That doesn't make my view right.
Yeah, because, people who can paint a painting.
Yep.
And what I get from it may not be what the artist's intention was or what they were feeling or what they were, going through when they were painting. And that's the magic of art.
Exactly. And, the best artists were ones that left it open and go, I can see where this is coming from, but I can also see where people would come up with other ideas. And there you go. We talked about Inception a little bit. And they had an interview with Christopher Nolan at the end of that movie when he spins the top. And Christopher Nolan says, you know what? My take on it was that it does stop. That the top stops spinning. So that was, he had his interpretation and that's what he believed. It's kind of like George Lucas for a long time believed that Boba Fett was killed by everything and screw all the fanfic and all the stories and everything that had Boba Fett in it was on this weird canon level before Disney bought it. And now, spoiler alert, with The Mandalorian, things have changed. Yeah. So artist interpretations can change over the years as well.
Yeah.
But I think that I think that Lynch is this is a guy that does photography, that does art, that does music, that he is such a consummate artist that, did he crawl up his own ass when it came to Fire Walk With Me? Yeah, he did. Yeah, he did. I mean, he did. He crawled up his own ass when he came up with that. But at the same time, even in that, there was things that I think bewildered the audience. And I think Lynch didn't even have a definitive idea of what it meant. I'm going to put this in here because this is going to mean something to somebody.
Yep. And even some of the more surreal things, and that's what I like about the dynamic with Frost and Lynch. Mm-hmm. Frost took that, and even he probably didn't know exactly what Lynch. I'm sure they might have talked about it a bit, but he kind of ran with it, and he kind of put things into context, but still not overly explaining.
Yeah, no. So at the end of the day, we've kind of hinted and pushed and talked about these things, but now that we're done with our thing, and the next podcast we're going to do is the fan book, this Skeleton Key to Twin Peaks. My take on things is that Mr. C was Bob, that it was a tulpa, Bob took over that, but it had Cooper's well-being. I go back to what we talked about in our last podcast, where I think this has been an infinite, loop, but it's always different every time.
Yeah.
So what we saw with season 1 and 2 and the end of season 3 was I'm going to push back on what's that word again? I need your help with it before. The unreliable narrator.
Yeah, unreliable narrative.
Yep, I'm gonna push back on that and say I don't think that was it. I think that things started to change once Cooper came out of the lodge, and that was the start of the next cycle and loop going into the next kind of dimension or timeline.
And I agree with that. And it's, if you break it all down with like Cooper and that, infinite loop. Mm-hmm. I brought this up it's Sisyphus with the rock.
Yes. And
if you're breaking it all down, basically, like, at least my take is Cooper's always going to be pushing that boulder.
Mm-hmm.
That is, the boulder is metaphorically saving Laura Palmer, and he's gonna get near the top. It's gonna roll down, and he's gonna have to start all over again. That's the tragedy of Agent Cooper.
Yep, and I think that what we got over 25 years, ironically through bullshit, and especially with that second season and things that occurred, was a full glimpse of the start and end of one of those timelines, because I think it started with Agent Jeffries popping in.
Yep.
Like, Agent Jeffries was one of those loops.
Yep. Yeah.
And then that's when Cooper got involved and all these things. So yes, I think what we saw was a snapshot from the start of season 1 to the end of the return of one of the full complete loops that Cooper makes with keeping Laura Palmer safe from the Jowdy and from Jowdy and Bob.
And then we get a glimpse of his next one with Carrie Page at the end of part 18. That's his next loop.
That's his next loop, and it might explain why Bob's not around. Bob's not in that timeline anymore.
Yeah.
Bob's moved to the other loop. Jowdy's moved to the other loop.
And we just still don't even know, because, in the house we have Miss Chalfont.
Yep.
So,
which we know is log fuckery. We know that's lodge fuckery.
That's lodge fuckery. So we know something's afoot, and we hear Sarah call for Laura's name. It's a loop from the pilot, and then she screams and cuts to black. That's the start of Cooper's next journey, and and it's just like, so what I like to see is season 4 of Twin Peaks exploring that, of course.
Mm-hmm.
Do I need it though? Not really. I kind of got what I think is the full experience.
Now, I am going to
3 seasons, the movie, and the books.
I am going to throw a fucking loop your way here, because I was just thinking about this as we were talking about it. What if it's not just Agent Cooper's loop? What if, because Agent Cooper's aged, Laura Palmer's aged, what if Jeffries was part of it as well? Like, Jeffries had his journey, which then led to Cooper and Laura Palmer, and now it's maybe Cooper again with Carrie Page, but then it may not be Cooper and Page in the next loop. It might be someone else.
Yeah, well, I mean, I think that's part of it. I think it's like an interconnectedness with all these stories and timelines. They're going to overlap on each other because they're fucking with time.
Yeah.
They're
fucking with dimensions.
Yeah, you could all arguably say the first fuckery of these timelines and dimensions was when Jeffries shows up in the Philadelphia office, and he lays that clue. Who exactly do you think this is?
Yep.
I'm not sure Lynch. I think he might have. I don't know what his idea behind that was. I mean, he could have meant the doppelganger for all we know.
I think so, because again, I think had he done season 3, the way Lynch and Frost came back for season 2 and introduced the doppelganger.
Yeah.
So I think that was always in the cards. Like, that was going to happen. But I think season 3 would have been a doppelganger thing, and at the end, Cooper would have came back.
Yeah.
But I also, if they had their way though, as well, Laura Palmer we never would have known who killed Laura Palmer.
Yeah. Well, I think Frost would eventually have
pushed for it.
Just because it's just you got to push the narrative along. That would have just log jammed things. I'd rather have them reveal it, but like have the next mystery in line.
Mm-hmm.
Which they weren't allowed to have that. They weren't allowed to cook up the next, and that's where we get the half-baked Wyndham Earl, as I think they were developing that next mystery.
Yes.
And that was going to be the Wyndham Earl thing, and it probably would have gone in a totally different direction with that character. Mostly, we kind of get a glimpse of it, why he flipped, why is he looking for the lodges, all that. I think it would have gone more into the Blue Book stuff, too, but their hands were forced, and it felt like, again, Wyndham Earl felt like a preliminary idea for the next mystery, and it was just rushed into being.
Which was unfortunate.
Yeah, I think they probably would have solved Laura's, if they had their way, realistically, it would have been season 3.
Yeah, I think so.
While they're building the next mystery with Wyndham Earl and let that play itself out. But,
they were too far. The problem was, and we talked about this ad nauseum, they were too far ahead of their time.
Yeah. And
especially for network television.
Yeah, I mean, they took it, it was because it was the first time you had like an hour tour go to television. And it's weird now that it took like 25 years for that to become like, now you see people who want to do like art house type movies are doing these limited series events where they can actually let characters breathe and grow.
Yep.
Kind of like what Lynch did. But, so we started seeing that, it wasn't, it took a long time, but they laid the groundwork for allowing the more cinematic things, laid the groundwork for, X-Files. But later on, more of like the golden age where you had Sopranos and Breaking Bad and Fargo and The Shield.
True Detective.
True Detective. Oh my God, I love that show because it feels like there's so many nods to Twin Peaks.
Especially that first season. Yeah.
Yes.
I have not watched the second or third. I haven't watched the second or third season yet.
Third season's really good. I have not seen the second one because I've heard bad things. But
okay.
First season has one of my favorite lines that I still say to Joe Brown whenever he picks a movie for the Joe Down that I know I'm going to hate. I call him the Michael Jordan of being the son of a bitch. Which is what Eddie Harrelson's character says to McConaughey.
Oh my God. Brilliant. Yeah. And I've started watching The Outsider as well, which is on HBO Max. And I also feel like that has nods to Twin Peaks.
Yeah. A lot of these premier TVOs, and I brought it up before, Lost. Really rode the way. And the co-creator of that, Damon Lindelof, has cited Twin Peaks as his major inspiration and keeping the mystery alive. So one of their things, and I think what made it successful was they weren't going to reveal the mystery right away.
No. And the only thing that made it, I think, problematic though was that they never had an ending either.
Yeah. Lost is one of those shows. I love the ride until I get to the
I'll be honest. I loved the first season, and then the second, because I was watching it as it aired, and it was interesting. I was living in an apartment downtown, and I didn't have cable, so I'd go to my parents' house, and I'd record it, and have them record it for me. And then I go and pick it up and watch it.
On a tape cassette?
On a tape cassette.
The fuck is a tape cassette?
Yeah, on a tape cassette. Absolutely.
A VHS?
A VHS, sir. And
it wasn't a Betamax?
Betamax was farly superior to the VHS. But I got to the first episode of season 2, and it hit me right then and there. I'm like, they don't know where they're going. Like, I'm off this ride.
I'll tell you. They went into season 3 with an end game. So it picks up on season 3.
Okay.
So if you ever want to rewatch it, because season 3 until probably the last 2 episodes, I really love just because it's so engaging and expanding a mystery is what I think they're masterful at. But much like any Damon Lindelof and J.J. Abrams thing, they can't stick the landing.
Right.
I mean, that's one of the things, like, Abrams can start a project and it'll be, this is really good, and then it's like, oh God, what the fuck was that?
Yeah. There's a really prime example of 3 movies from a tentpole franchise that started with Abrams, ended with Abrams because it needed Abrams the whole time and didn't have it.
They made 3 movies of the game? Or regarding Henry?
So,
what was the third regarding Henry movie?
Regarding Henry Part 3, 2:54 p.m. So, for those that aren't getting that, that is a Roger Waters Pink Floyd reference. So, I wanted to also talk about a little bit of the inconsistencies with the book. They brought up where you brought up that the Agent Preston talking about how she get back to Shelley. Mark Frost was asked about this, and he attributes this to Preston abandoning her research after discovering the timeline change. And Red's not mentioned in the book, despite the details provided of his drug dealing network being dismantled. The fight between Ben Horne and Will Hayward was stated to take place the same day as the Savings and Loans explosion, where in the episode it's the night before. So
timeline changed, Paul.
This, which is interesting because at the end of the day, it's all been retconned. But it was just kind of interesting. Talks about how Hank Jennings was arrested at Dead Dog Farm when actually he was assaulted at Hurley and was arrested. I think David Lynch and Mark Frost were not going to bring up Nadine's super strength. I don't think they were ever going to reference that at all. So yeah, there was a few things there in the book, but again, it's forgiven because of the fact that the timeline changed.
Yeah. And, it's a show that's open to like it gets a wide berth for interpretation.
There were so many writers involved in it. It spanned 25 years. There was network interference, especially in the first 2 seasons.
Yeah. And I'm sure a lot of that stuff from season 2, Frost just had no interest in revisiting a whole lot or getting meticulous into that. Because he seems more meticulous with the events of the first season than he does with season 2 stuff.
Yeah, I completely agree with you. Except for the characters that he cared about, as we saw.
Yeah.
So I think this was a successful viewpoint. Again, our interpretation and our kind of viewpoint of that being this is a snapshot into an infinite loop.
Yep.
Is our interpretation. It's where Joe and I came together. We didn't know we were going to come together on this at all. No.
We kind of came at different angles, but we landed in the same spot, which is it's just great. That's just like speaks to like how great this whole show and everything involved is.
Yes, and ours is not the be-all end-all. We're not going to sit here and say we solved it, we cracked the code.
No, we have not cracked the code of this at all. We just have ideas.
Mm-hmm. This is our interpretation of what it means to us. Now, next podcast, we're going to be looking into someone else's interpretation of what it means to them. And I'm really curious to see our viewpoints on that.
There's going to be a lot of overlap with what the guy has, and there'll be obviously we're going to have disagreements.
Yep.
But I'm glad a guy took that much effort
Yes.
It's something that he loves and that we love. And he doesn't come off like a condescending prick like that guy in YouTube.
And I want to make it very clear. We're going to be, just like everything else, we're going to be very fair. I mean, this is a book that you can go out and purchase, so we're going to be critical. You know, we're going to be reviewing it. We're going to be talking about our own ideas on it. We're not in it to shit on it. We're not in it to promote it or make it, you know, this is, you know, whatever. We're both going to go into it, I think, as critics, which will lead us into our new podcast, Joe, which is...
We're going to be doing albums. We got to get the schedule or whatever down. I imagine it'll probably be the same as what we did with Twin Peaks.
Yeah, it'll be weekly.
Where one of us will pick an album. It's kind of in the format of Cast That Movie and the Joe Down, but I don't think we're going to be torturing each other because where I think like those are more like we're just bullshitting and having fun.
Yep.
This is going to be more like we're really into this, and I really want to talk about this album with my buddy who's really into music.
Yes, and I think that's going to be fascinating. Do you have I'm going to let you start with the album. So, do you have an album in mind to start the show with?
I do, but I'm not going to say it yet. I'm not going to put it on the podcast.
Perfect. Love that. So, Joe will be starting off with that one. I'll pick the next one, which I will tell you, I have mine picked, and it's nothing that he's ever going to expect. So,
Hit Me Baby One More Time by Britney Spears.
Ooh, you caught me. No, it's a far more obscure album that I actually came across today. And I thought this will be really interesting to start it with.
Will be something the thing that we also have to remember is it's something the other person will be able to find.
You'll be able to find it. You'll be able to.
Yeah. Because there's like some stuff that are just like, there's this Beatles bootleg.
No. I found it very easily on YouTube Music.
Okay.
Yep, I found it very easily on YouTube Music.
So we'll get that. That'll be. We'll talk. It's probably gonna be pretty soon. I think it's kind of the end of the Twin Peaks thing. We're going to take a few weeks to digest
yes, we are.
one, but I imagine we'll probably record the first music one probably next week.
I think that would be legit. Now, what do you have going on with the Joe Down and the Joe Down blog and everything, Joe?
Well, we came back. The mystery movie. We kind of fell behind like we all did in January, but the mystery movie remained and it became the first movie reviewed of the new year, and that was Cats.
Oh God, you didn't!
We did. It's up right now.
Holy fuck!
It's what I imagine like. I wrote in the review, it's what I think Hunter Thompson actually saw in the Lizard Bar orgy in Fear and Loathing Las Vegas. Brown hated it more than me. I was more just gobsmacked by how fucking weird it was. It's like, it's not great, but like, it's an experience, man. It's just...
I'm going to read an excerpt here because I got to admit, I have not been on Facebook since I got a 30-day ban. I got ban hammered on Facebook, so I'm really far behind on a lot of things in that world, and that's where I got my Joe Down updates. So I'm going to read a little thing here. What could go wrong? Well, it appears a lot. This movie is what I imagine Hunter S. Thompson really saw in his LSD-fueled hallucinations in the Hotel Lizard Orgy chapter in Fear and Loathing in Las Vegas, only with toe tap dancing songs and song and dance numbers. Brown, while I wrap my head around Taylor Swift as a CGI cat showering catnip cocaine on other CGI cats, why don't you give us your first thoughts? My first thought is you're a real asshole for picking this movie. Oh my God. Yeah, please go out and look at this, guys, because I am so glad you guys did this movie because I have avoided this like the plague, and I really want to hear your guys' take on it.
And don't forget, there's a butthole cut of this movie.
Excuse me?
There was the original cut of this movie. The cats had buttholes, and they had to digitally take them out. Everybody's asking for the Snyder cut of Justice League, I'm demanding the butthole cut of Cats.
I want the butthole cut.
Release the butthole cut.
Oh my god! And I heard too that that also they looked terrible. So so am I right that it came out like for a week and then they pulled it?
They pulled it. They updated the CGI.
And then put it back out. Like they literally did a video game update on a movie.
Yeah, this would actually not be a bad idea for when you guys get back to cast that movie, because from what I've read, there was a lot of like ambition, and it just the execution just became like a giant clusterfuck. They went originally. The Warner Brothers bought the rights or whatever. They're intending it to be a cartoon or even like a Toy Story animated type thing, which I think, and I argue in the review, would have worked a lot better than having these horrific looking cat people. Which, I mean, if you ever had a bad trip on LSD or mushrooms, like you have an instant feeling of recognition when you see these things. Like, my God, I've been there. Why would they put this on the screen?
Wow. Well, so I'm going to bring this out here. There's a movie that I want to do. And I'm going to put out here, this is for cast that movie. It is called Omega Doom. Have you heard of this movie?
I have not.
It is a Rutger Hauer 1996 sci-fi action film. Okay? It was done by unknown director Albert Pudian. Who
the Albert Pudian?
The Albert Puin. It was supposed to rival Terminator, and it was actually set to be part of the Euro Disney. It was filmed. So in the screenplay, okay, it was supposed to be set in Paris at Euro Disney, and the characters were supposed to be animatronic theme park figures who continue global. And Omega Doom was originally built to be part of a new exhibit at Euro Disney established around the Terminator franchise, and the entire setting was within the theme park. That was the original.
Isn't this the premise of that Simpsons episode where the Itchy and Scratchy robots come to life?
Essentially. But this was supposed to be a big thing. And then Euro Disney obviously fucking went to hell. And so they had to change the screenplay. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yep, because it was filmed and it opened in 1992. And it was supposed to be this big thing, but as we all know, Euro Disney did not go well up until like 1995, and now it's been changed to Disney Resort Paris. But yeah, it was screwed. I mean, by 1994, it was $3 billion in debt. But this movie was supposed to be originally the reveal of a whole fucking theme park, and the movie got a 1 out of 4 when it came out, and was just it's a mess. But my God, I love it because it has Rutger Hauer, and anything Rutger Hauer does, he's fucking awesome in. Nice. Everyone else around him was shit.
Nice. Well, all right. Then coming up next for the next Showdown, we're doing Kung Fury.
Nice.
I've never seen it. I've never seen it, so I'm excited.
You should be. I love it. I actually have on one of my playlists the David Hasselhoff's theme song for that.
Nice.
Yeah. I love that movie. It's a guilty pleasure and all the beautiful reasons that it would be.
Is it better than Manborg?
Oh, that's a toughie.
Manborg's pretty great.
Manborg was amazing, wasn't it? I'm so glad I turned you on the Manborg. Yeah, it's shorter.
Yeah, isn't it like a half hour, 45 minutes or something?
It's about 45 minutes long, and so it's unlike even Manborg had its slog spots. where I feel like the timeline or the time is perfect for Kung Fury, because it just goes from one ridiculous thing to the next ridiculous thing. It doesn't have time to slog.
Nice.
Yeah.
All
Yeah.
right. So do we have any updates on Cast That Movie, Paul?
We don't. We do not yet. Scott has kind of gone on a sabbatical.
Let's get down to brass tacks. This is because, I put your major advertiser out of business.
It could very well be. I think he is trying.
Ted Mills has been put out of business.
Ted Mills got fucked by you. That is one of our issues. You opened that
lock business.
Mm-hmm.
I opened the Joe Down Lock Emporium next door to his, where I sold everything 20% cheaper. I put him under.
You did.
He never gave me that box, man. My goal in life is to destroy Ted Mills.
Well, you did a good job, and with it came the sabbatical from the Cast That Movie. And so with that, as well as The Office, I don't know anything about what's going on with Bears, Beats, and Bobbleheads. I'm sure we'll hear from Scott soonish.
Yeah.
But we are doing another one, and you've been invited to that, and you said yes, which is a Tour of Hawkins, a podcast about Stranger Things that I'm doing with a new partner to the Joe Down, which is Griffin E. is her name. She's a big Stranger Things enthusiast. We have already recorded a couple episodes. We are just kind of getting some things streamlined and straightened out before we start putting them up.
Awesome. I'm excited.
Mm-hmm. So, you've been asked to join us on that one, and you've agreed. So I'm not sure if it's going to be every episode you'll be in on it, or just a couple episodes here and there. We'll figure that out as we go forward. But yeah, so then that will be 4 podcasts now that will be on the Joe Down.
Yeah, it's fun. We're expanding.
Fun. Yeah. We are. Mm-hmm. We are expanding, and so I thank you once again from the bottom of my heart from allowing me and Scott, Jode, and now Griffiny to be a part of the Joe Down family.
Oh, I'm happy. The more people who are helping out and wanting to contribute, I am more than happy. Just because otherwise, it would just be me and Joe Brown farting on movies.
Well, it's working. It's working. Yeah. So, and I think that music one will be really interesting. And I think I'm interested to eventually know what the album's going to be, as I think our listeners are. But now we've plugged for a while, Joe. Why don't you take us out, buddy?
What year is this?